Hello everyone, how's it going? Billy Ballgame here, back with another video. I apologize that I missed getting a video out for you all last weekend, but I was coaching in a tournament in Columbia all day Friday, and then a big chunk of the day on Saturday. So by the time I got home on Saturday, I was kind of wiped out. So I've been really busy with baseball, and then heading to the end of the school year. So I was sitting here down in my card room / man cave, doing some work with some of the cards in my collection. So what I was doing was I was taking cards that I may grade at some point out of top loaders and putting them into card savers. So I've had kind of writer's block for the last little while, like trying to think, well, what does my next video need to be about? And I just haven't really had a whole lot of time to think about it and to kind of plan my next few videos. But while I was going through switching these cards over, I was like, well, I'm down here, I'm going through these cards. Why not show them my process on how I evaluate cards for grading and how I determine what cards that I'm going to grade. So I figured I would show you that process. And why am I moving cards from top loaders to card savers? Because I keep running out of top loaders, and this is going to be a mini rant for a second, so bear with me. But I'm still kind of frustrated today, 2024, so what, 2 years post-pandemic, and top loaders are still really hard to find. Or when you do find them, they're still way too expensive. And I don't understand that, and it kind of frustrates me a little bit. So earlier today we were in Columbia, and so I went ahead and ran by the Dugout, the local card shop there, and bought 8 packs of regular top loaders. Now, these are $3 a piece there at the Dugout, which is a pretty good price. It's cheaper than you're usually going to be able to find them online unless you buy them at a case at a time. And with me saving up for the National and getting ready for the National, to be honest with you, I just didn't feel like spending $100 right now for a case of top loaders. So to me, it's just insane, like how expensive they are still. But then the Dugout during the pandemic, they had a limit on how many top loaders you could buy. I think you could buy 2 of these, 2 of any type of pack. So what I would do is I would go in and buy 2 packs of these, and then I would go and buy 2 packs of the ones that say rookie card across the top. Even though I don't like them, it just gave me the opportunity to get more top loaders. And then since we've moved in here, I've gone through like 2 or 3 cases of top loaders. So I can't keep up. So anyway, I've been kicking cards out of top loaders and putting them in card savers that I'm gonna consider for grading. And then while I've been moving them from top loader to card saver, some of them I've been looking at a little bit further to determine if I want to grade them or not. So I'm going to show you, again, like I said earlier, I'm going to show you that process. But to be 100% honest with you, I prefer to send cards in for grading in top loaders, and there's a reason for that. I'll show you. Even though the card grading companies, sorry, I'm fishing a card out. Hang on just a second. All right, so anyway, I'll get it out when I move. But I prefer to send cards in for grading in hard cases, not card savers, because top loaders are just more rigid. I feel they give the card more protection during shipping. And they're also closer to the actual size of the card. So I just grabbed this Griffey off my display case. So there's not a whole lot of room outside of the card in top loaders. So if I'm going to send a stack of these, you know, with rubber bands wrapped in bubble wrap or however I'm going to ship them, there's less that can happen to these cards that could cause damage to them, in my opinion, in a top loader compared to a card saver. And whenever I get into the process of how I grade them, I'll show you what I'm talking about. So bear with me. I'm going to move the camera over to my desk. And again, I've got cards everywhere, so please don't mind the mess. And then I'll show you a card that I think got damaged in a card saver that I sent in to grade a while ago. And then I'll show you the process of how I evaluate whether or not to submit a card for grading. So hang on, I'll be right back with you. Show you this card. So this is one of the first cards that I sent into SGC, or this is a card from one of the first orders that I sent in to SGC. And I figured that this card was going to grade at least a 9. And some of you may think that that's an overly optimistic grade for this card with how tough it is with the foil surface. But I sent this in a stack of cards in card savers. And whenever I got it back and saw the 8.5 on there, I was blown away. It was like, how did that card grade an 8.5? Because in my opinion, it's a really sharp card, and I'll show you here shortly how I determined that. But once I looked at it closer, this top corner up here, I hope that this will focus, is almost, it's like bent down. And I'm not going to say 100% certain that it wasn't that way when I sent it, but I'm almost positive that it wasn't. And I hope that that shows up, that this camera will zoom in so you can see that. But anyway, that corner, maybe you can see it there, how it's folded like the shadow, the very tip of the corner is darker. So I don't know if that got damaged in shipping in a card saver, or if SGC may have damaged it during the grading process. But I would rather not send cards in card savers so I don't have to risk or take that chance of whether or not that card got bent in the mail or if SGC damaged it. Because to be honest with you, any of the cards that I've sent in top loaders, I haven't had any questions about whether or not they got damaged since then. So I'm going to pull out a stack of these cards here, and I'm pulling out of this box here. And this is cards that I moved into card savers. These cards are still in top loaders, okay? And so these are some cards that I'm kind of not as urgent on. Well, actually, these are hockey. So let me get my other box real quick. I'll be right back with you. All right, sorry about that. Once again, this video is kind of chaos. So this box here is the cards that I have them kind of arranged in order of kind of cards that I want to get graded quickly. Some of these in this other box, they're cards that I may get graded at some point, but they're not necessarily a priority. So in the cards I want to get sent out quickly, this is the Ernie Banks I got recently from Chris. I obviously evaluate vintage cards differently than I would junk wax or modern cards. So this one is a PSA crack out from a PSA 4. I don't know if you can see that or if I tore it up. So VGX, so there's the 4. So I'm going to send this to SGC just to see if it grades better than a 4, which I'm hoping that it will, because I have a PSA 7 that is actually off-centered, and I like the looks of this 4 better, and I just bought the PSA 7 out of Impulse. So I'm hoping that this grades as a 5 or 6, because for a 4, it was a really, really sharp card. And I haven't done any SGC submissions in quite a while. Shoot, I don't even know. It's probably since before Christmas. And then this is another one that I'm going to get graded here pretty quickly, hopefully, for the 1960 set. But I probably won't be grading any cards until after the National. And for those of you that have followed the channel for a while, I'm not bragging. I've been pretty good on my grades. So really the one that I missed the most was my 70 Topps Carl Yastrzemski. I thought it would grade as a 7 and it came back as a 6. That Michael Jordan I just showed you, I thought would grade at least a 9. I have an 86 Jose Canseco Donruss that I sent in that I thought would grade a 9, that graded an 8, but I missed all kinds of black kind of print smudges. So that's on me, but for the most part, like when I evaluate a card and I don't miss anything, like I'm pretty close on my grades. So here is one of the cards that I'm going to send in here pretty soon to get graded. And as you can tell, this is an 87 Topps Bo Jackson, and I love this card. They actually had one at the dugout today in a PSA 9 that for a split second I thought about buying, but I thought better of it because I'll just send this one in and it should grade at least a 9. And I'll dig into this and show you how I determine that. So in pre-grading before, I have graded this as a 9 to a 9.5. And to be honest with you, I think a 9 is the worst grade that this card can get. And if I can figure out the camera angles and all that other stuff, I'll flip this back around and show you how I determined that this card was going to grade a 9 or a 9.5. So let me flip this around, get this to work. So as you can see, I have my reading glasses on. I'm starting to wear these more and more frequently. But what I do, I loop these and I use a magnifying glass. Now, I have one of those centering tools that I have used, but to be honest with you, I don't use it very often because to me, you almost have to be a mathematician to determine the centering of a card using that tool. So me, I eyeball it. And if I determine it to be off-centered at all, to me, I'm usually going to knock that down to at least a 9 or a 9.5, depending on the centering. Now, this one is a little off-center from top to bottom. So right away, I tell myself in my brain that the best this card can grade is a 9.5 because it's got a little bit of off-centering. So I'm already thinking that in my process. And then what I'll do is I'll either loop it or I'll hit it with a magnifying glass. So let me go ahead and take this out of the card saver. Sorry, bear with me once again here. Again, this is a process. I hope you all find some value in this. I haven't graded a ton of cards on my own. Like, I'm definitely no Elite Co 3 or anything like that. Like, I haven't graded hundreds of cards. But so far I've been pretty accurate with my grades. So that makes me more confident on what cards I should send in for grading and which ones I shouldn't. If I was sending in cards like this, thinking I was going to get 10s and got 6s, like, I think I would probably quit grading. But for the most part, I'm usually maybe a half a grade off Every once in a while, a full grade off. So if I determine a card is going to grade as a 9, I'll send that card in now because I'm confident in my ability to determine what the grade is. Then if it gets an 8, then which luckily doesn't happen very often, then I just kind of figure, well, I lost on that one. You know what I mean? But luckily, knock on wood, that hasn't happened a whole lot yet. And then, so let me back up before I start showing you how I evaluate the card. Or actually, no, I'll go ahead and do this first because it'll make sense this way. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll hit this with a magnifying glass. Now you can see this one's lit up, and this is a 10 times magnifier. And what I'll do is I'll also use my overhead light, and then I'll just hit this, and what I'll do is I'll look at the surface of this card to see if there are any indentions, any scratches, any fish eyes that I can't see with the naked eye, right? So I'm doing a general overview on this card with the magnifying glass. And then usually under the light with the magnifying glass, any surface issues or scratches or anything like that will usually jump out. And this one looks pretty good. So what I'll do normally, after I hit it with the magnifier, if I notice a flaw in the card that I think is going to bump it down to where it doesn't make sense to grade that card anymore, then I'll just set it in a different pile. And then eventually what I'll do is I'll just top loader that, either put it in one of my boxes in the closet or put it in my display case. But if it passes the first part, then what I'll do is I'll pull out my loupe. And this loupe is 20 times magnified. And you can see it's got a light. Now, the grading companies, from the best of my knowledge, I know they have software that they can zoom way in on the cards if they want to. But from what I've seen, they're sitting at a desk with an overhead lamp and a magnifier built into the lamp in a dark room. That magnifier allegedly is magnified to 10 times, the same as this. So I figure 20 times I'm going to be able to see stuff that they're not going to be able to see on this card if they magnify it at 10 times. And then I'll give it a good once over on the edges and the corners. And you may have heard me say this on previous videos that I've opened 5 boxes of 87 tops, and I've bought a bunch of rack packs. I've also bought 2 factory sealed sets of 87 tops, looking to find cards that are good enough to grade. And out of all of those boxes and those factory sets and those rack packs, this is the only Bo Jackson that I have found that I feel is worth grading. So again, I loop the whole thing. With the loop, what I'm really looking for is the corners and the edges. And in my opinion, any card is gonna, that especially if it's from 87 tops, 86, 85, it doesn't matter how great a card it is, when you put it under a 10 times loop or a 20 times loop, there's gonna be some chipping on the edge. Like, I'll almost bet you money. I even have a 1990 Topps Frank Thomas in a PSA 10 that has some chipping on the bottom edge that I can see with this loop. I have an 87 Topps traded Greg Maddux in a PSA 10 that has chipping along the edge that I can see with this loop. So what I can see with this loop is the individual pixels, the print dots that these cards are printed with. So I determine, based off of the amount of chipping on the edges of these cards, like if it's one print dot, they probably aren't going to be able to see that. And so I'll go ahead and send it in to get graded. And then, like I said, this one, I feel as though the centering is really the only thing that's keeping this from being a 10. And if I send this in and it grades a 9, I'm good with that. I'll keep it in my collection. So normally what I'll do is, once I evaluate a card, I'll write its grade down, what I think it's going to grade on one of these stickies. I'll pop it on the back of the card, and then I'll put it in the box, right? And like I said, this box here is the first group of cards that I'm going to start getting graded once I start sending cards in to get graded after the National once again. So that card is definitely a card I'm going to send in to get graded. But I've got other cards in here that it's not quite so cut and dry. And I'll try to find one. Okay, so here's an example. Here's an 81 Topps Harold Baines rookie card. I got this in the 81 set from the basement collection. I have pre-graded this as an 8 to an 8.5. And as you can see, the centering is a little off, and it may have a little bit of a tilt to it. So to me, again, I kind of just eyeball and guesstimate on the centering. And for me, like I said, usually if a card is off center, the best grade it can get is a 9.5. Depending on the level of off-centeredness, then it's going to drop to a 9. So I automatically assume, with this one being off-centered and tilted, the best it can grade is an 8.5. Then I go through the same process. I hit it with a magnifier and look at the surface. Surface looks good on this one, right? There's a little bit of pink on the back of his jersey that I don't know if you can see on the camera or not. So I don't know if that's a common flaw with this card or what. It kind of goes up the back of his jersey too. And then under the magnifier, I can see a little bit of chipping on the edges, right? So without looping it, I figure that this card, the best it can grade is an 8.5. And then I'll loop it and I'll see how the corners look. This one has a little touch on the top left corner. A little bit of chipping on this edge. Bottom left corner has a tiny touch, chipping on the bottom edge. But a lot of this sometimes is how they cut them. So this may not actually be chipping from, being moved around and put in top loaders and penny sleeves. It may have been how they cut it. If the blade got dull or whatever they used to cut it, it could cause the edge to not be cut 100% clean, which could cause some chipping on the edges. And this right edge has chipping also. And then to me, I just kind of have to make the guesstimate on the level of chipping, on how bad it is. And I'll compare it with other cards that I have graded in similar grades. So I would pull an 8 out and determine, the level of chipping along the borders, okay? Then what I'll do is I'll take my phone, which I'm using to record so I can't show you. I'll take my phone and I will look this up on VCP, Vintage Card Pricing. And I'll use that to determine, okay, what is the value of this card in an SGC 8 and an SGC 8.5? And I may even bump that down a grade to a 7.5 or a 7. What is the value of this card in a range? If this card is worth more than $15 in the grade I think it's going to come back as, then I'll go ahead and grade it. If I'm positive or pretty certain that this is going to grade an 8 to an 8.5, and then this is a $10 card in that grade, then I'm not going to grade that card unless it's a card that I really want to have graded in my collection. And I have some of those in here. that I'm going to grade, regardless, just to have in my collection. Let me see. So here's an example, right? I'll just show you the 82 Nolan Ryan. So again, I got this from the basement collection. I have pre-graded this card as a 9. Now, this card in a 9 is worth $100, $80, somewhere around there, right? But let's say this card I thought was going to grade an 8. And the 8 is worth $11. Let's just say. I really like Nolan Ryan and plan on doing a player run on Nolan Ryan at some point. So I would go ahead and grade this, get an 8 back, have it be worth $11, but I would keep that in my collection as an 8. So again, whether or not I'm going to grade it depends on the value of the card and whether or not it's a card that I'm going to keep in my collection. Because some of these cards, like I already have, and I already have graded. So this one I have in a PSA 9. This one is probably going to grade as an 8 or a 9. If this one grades as an SGC 9, then I will keep this. I will move, trade, whatever, with the PSA 9 and keep this one, as long as this one is better centered than the other one, right? If this grades as an SGC 8, it's probably a $30 card, somewhere around there. So I will use this to trade or move it or something. I'm not going to keep duplicates of the same card. So I have, again, 200 or 300 cards probably that I want to evaluate for grading. And if you're looking at cards to grade as 9s and 10s, it's pretty easy to determine. Just based off of, it's almost got to be a perfect card. Even with the loop that supposedly magnifies at double what SGC and PSA do, I'm still really careful and really picky about what damage I will let slip through, because again, they're gonna have chipping on the edges, especially if they're a Topps card from the 80s. Like, they're gonna have chipping. So it's just a matter of what level of chipping it is, and if I think that they'll be able to pick it up, because again, I'm magnifying the card more than they are. So if I can see damage with a 20 times loop, that doesn't necessarily mean they'll be able to see it looking at it magnified 10 times. But I've got to determine what I feel is a level that will affect the grade or not, if they'll be able to pick it up. And then obviously, if you're looking at vintage cards, like a 60 Topps Ernie Banks, those are harder to determine because a 5 in a 1960 Topps Ernie Banks, they can look very different. Some 5s can be off-centered, but maybe they'll have really clean edges and corners. Other ones will be really nicely centered, but there's going to be a ding on a corner for it to get a 5, at least on one corner, right? So the older cards are harder to determine what they're going to grade. So for me, I usually look at a wider range in there. So if I thought this was going to grade as a 5, I would look at VCP, and I might look for 3s up to 6s. And then if that 3 is worth more than $15, and let's say a 3 is worth $30, I'm going to pay $15 to get it graded. If I bought this card for $15 and it grades as a 3, then I'm at the break-even point, right? So vintage cards you have to be a little bit more careful on, because again, there's a wider range of what a 6 can look like and what a 5 can look like. They're not all going to be the same. In a 10, they're all going to look pretty similar. In a 9, a lot of them are going to look pretty similar. One of them may be slightly off-centered, or one of them might have a very tiny ding on a corner, but there's not going to be a huge range in difference between what a 9 looks like, right? So that's pretty much my process on how I determine the grade of a card. And with the newer cards, it's easier because the cardboard and the printing process is better than they were in the 80s and older. So it's easier to determine the grade on the newer stuff. The older the card, obviously, again, the harder it is to determine the grade of those cards. So again, I look for a wider range when I go to determine the value based off of what I think a card is going to grade in accordance with the VCP average price. So again, I'm hoping that I can start sending some cards out after the National to get graded, because I have a whole lot of them that I want to send in. A lot of cards from the sets that I picked up in the basement collection. A lot of like Ozzie Smith player run type of cards. A lot of Ken Griffey Jr. cards that I just don't have graded already in my collection, and stuff like that. Like, I don't have any really super high dollar cards that I want to send out for grading unless I get lucky and get some 10s. Like if I get a 10 on a 1982 Topps Nolan Ryan, like that would be the most valuable card in my collection right now. So again, I hope you guys got some value out of this video. Again, my apologies for missing last week's. And if I didn't explain this process clear enough, please let me know in the comments. And if you have any questions that I didn't cover about the process in this video, please let me know. And if you'd like to see me go more in depth, I'll do that, because I'm all for just helping the community as best I can save money and be able to grade cards on their own that they enjoy and want to keep in their collection, right? So that's kind of my thought behind wanting to share how I go through this with you all. So again, I hope you enjoyed it. This is going to be a long video. It's probably going to be over 30 minutes. But hopefully the value is there, so you'll stick with it and watch the video. But I'm going to wrap it up at that. So until the next one, I hope everybody has a good one, and I'll talk to you later.